Ah yes, an Amiga 600. Now there's a sight for sore eyes. Although whether you're in the camp that gets sore eyes from looking at this little machine or finds relief from it is a discussion for another day. Because today is all about this man, Nigel Mansell, Formula 1 World Champion in 1992 and generally well-known sports personality. Now back in 1992 I enjoyed both watching and playing F1 games, and although my main staple was Super Monaco Grand Prix on the Mega Drive, Nigel Mansell's World Championship was definitely on my playlist. It's a decent enough racer by Gremlin Graphics released on a variety of platforms. The original Amiga incarnation offers all the usual options and tracks, providing a playable and somewhat compelling experience. But what if I were to tell you that you don't need to sit there waggling that joystick around? Yes, you. There's another way, a much more realistic way. Introducing the Spectravideo Logic 3 Digital FreeWheel. Yes, a steering wheel which seemingly works by magic, being unconnected to any kind of steering column or dashboard. The first time I saw this was on Bad Influence, Season 1, Episode 5, airing on the 11th of November 1992. I remember it well.
With this, the new Nigel Mansell FreeWheel. You plug it into your driving sim instead of a joystick, and it's just attached by a thin wire. This game I'm playing, Nigel Mansell's World Championship, actually recommends using the freewheel for extra realism. You choose to do manual gears, and you change the gears then by sort of flicking the wheel backwards and forwards, which is really difficult to do.
Violet did her best to explain this new device, but I was left feeling unclear as to whether this thing was actually any good or just a chunk of throwaway plastic. Regardless, I wanted to get my hands on one and experience this new level of realism, because that's what the 90s were all about. Devices just on the cusp of emerging technology designed to enhance your gaming experience, but often falling incredibly short of their targets. This time though, we had a pairing. Nigel Mansell's new game was designed specifically to work with the freewheel. It's even in the manual. So was this a winning combination? Let's try it out. There's no real setup needed, you can just unplug your joystick, plug in the freewheel and away you go. Everything is pretty straightforward. Left turns left, right turns right. The buttons accelerate and tipping the wheel towards you brakes. Essentially, it just mirrors the joystick movement, so tipping the wheel forward should mimic pressing the joystick up, but as that's not a mapped control for this game, it currently does nothing, unless we change to manual transmission, but we'll get back to that later. Now, after playing for a bit, it's surprisingly quite responsive. We're not talking Wii controller levels of sensitivity, but everything works as it should, and it's actually quite a pleasing arrangement. Although you'll need a desk to lean your elbows on, otherwise your arms are just going to ache themselves into oblivion. The wheel works in all game modes with ease. Really, the problems only set in when you go through the menus. They are monumentally hard to navigate. I had to essentially chuck the wheel all over the shop until I got the option I wanted, and then rapidly press the fire button before it moved anywhere else. Fluid movements just didn't seem to work here, and I couldn't even work out which way I should be turning the wheel to select each option. It felt like there was no rhyme or reason to proceedings. But if you do manage to get to the control menu, then you'll find options to specifically tell the game you're using the freewheel. It doesn't make much of a difference for me, or it doesn't seem to, as I'm using the digital variant, but if you're fortunate enough to have the analog version, then you can choose that option and be rewarded with an elevated level of control. With my digital version, I'm essentially just clicking the joystick left or right when I turn in those directions, and as we all know, digital controls don't really make for the most fluid of movements. It also means that me chucking the wheel as far right and left as possible makes absolutely no difference to the severity of the turn, and it would be far more efficient to just make small movements in each direction. But instinct seems to take over and I just wang the wheel left and right like I do in my real car. Yes, this is exactly how I drive in real life. If we take a moment to crack open the wheel, inside we find a very simple layout. One PCB, one controller chip and several what I believe are mercury switches. When you move in a given direction, the mercury sloshes about in these little caps, completing a circuit at one end. Depending on how you hold the wheel, different circuits will be completed, telling the controller how it's being held. Of course, analog versions work on a different principle, just like the accelerometers built into Wii controllers, and are far rarer than the digital incarnation. This is partly as they were a tenner more expensive on launch, but also because they're less compatible with other software, acting more like a mouse than a joystick. But I certainly wouldn't like to try controlling cannon fodder with one of those. As noted on this advert, however, wouldn't it be a dream to combine this steering wheel with the QuickJoy foot pedal controller and have a racing experience so damn realistic it could blow your face off? Well, it just so happens that's what I'm about to do. Now, this thing is incredibly easy to connect. Simply slip it in line between your controller and the Amiga, and then we can use these scaled up dip switches to assign a button or direction to each pedal. So I can assign the accelerator button to the green, up to yellow and down to orange, essentially copying the clutch, brake, accelerator layout of your typical car. Now if I press the green pedal, you can see the car accelerates on screen. Amazing stuff. Obviously this needs to go on the floor though, this isn't Coyote Ugly. Okay, now if we were using the manual transmission before, we'd have to do an irritating flick forward to change gear, like Violet explained earlier. But with the pedals attached, well, everything is much easier. In fact, the whole experience is enriched dramatically, despite the somewhat cheap and nasty feel of the pedals themselves, and they do have a tendency to move about on the floor. Now I can shift up with the yellow pedal, brake and automatically shift down with orange, and accelerate with green, and it really comes together quite nicely. I wasn't sure how this would pan out, but I am impressed. Of course, this is never going to feel realistic, despite what we were told by the 90s marketers, but it's a step closer, and a nice way to play any racing game on the platform really. These controllers were both available for a variety of consoles, so I'd recommend grabbing a set on your platform of choice and giving it a go. Just remember, you won't be able to react as quickly as a joypad, and your arms are gonna hurt. Of course, we're not even restricted to Nigel Mansell. We can play practically any game with this combination. Take Micro Machines for example. It's a driving game, and it works well, kind of. The only problem here is the true nature of digital is revealed in its horrific glory. Micro Machines is a game which requires twitchy directional pressing, dabbing left here, right there. With the Logic 3 Digital, you're either essentially holding down left or holding down right, with it taking a lot longer to swing a steering wheel in the opposite direction as opposed to moving your thumb across a D-pad. But it's not just driving games. For example, this arrangement works impressively well with Desert Strike, and in fact, probably all manner of Amiga games. I'm not going to sit here and go through each of them, you get the general idea. Anyway, that's the Logic 3 FreeWheel and the QuickJoy SV129 foot pedal controller working in blissful unison. I can't think of a more beautiful combination. Perhaps if you can, tell me about it in the comments. I'll be riveted to find out. Thanks for watching. There's some more videos here, some more things you can do. Subscribe, thumbs up, thumbs down, contribute on Patreon. In any case, have a great evening.